all for coming back. I hope you had enjoyed everything last week. It seemed like so long ago. It's been a really long week for me, sorry. I'm not going to talk long, just say I'm really thrilled to see you guys. We have, we're doing 2 options tonight, so I'm cutting myself short so we don't have to spend here, so we can get all the business done. I will definitely be bothering you a little later. So we're going to go ahead and, you guys ready to start up?
I think we are. We had one person who had called, Ben had called and said he wouldn't be able to make it this evening. And then we are still expecting Bruce Copeland and then Justin, Charlie, and Morgan. So as far as we know, they're coming, but to be respectful of your time, we want to go ahead and get started. But hopefully they'll be here.
Well, good evening, good evening.
Good evening.
Well, thank you. It's good to see everybody's face when I was reminded of my elementary school days, teaching days, when I would say, oh, it's so good to see everybody's sunshining face. As Michelle mentioned, we're going to discuss 2 options tonight. One, enforce the law, be fair to those who follow the rules. And the third option is slow down and rebuild our common bonds. I want to just kind of call your attention again to the ground rules. They're on the chart on the side of the room. And I'll just mention a couple. One is remembering the listening and speaking. And I invite you to both listen and speak from your heart, so that you're saying what is so for you and what matters to you, and that you're listening from your heart to what it is that each of the others in the room also have to say, so that to the extent possible, we can listen through the lens of their particular point of view. The next one that I want to mention is remember that we are in a deliberation, and deliberation is not a debate and it's not a discussion. A couple of things is that we begin to look at different options for addressing the problem, and we're going to do more of that this evening than perhaps we did last week. So that you are really considering the advantages and the disadvantages of an option, what its benefits are, what the trade-offs are, and what the consequences for making that particular choice for action would be. I'm going to ask people to recognize and remember that every option we have has an upside and a downside. And our job in a deliberation is to talk about both of those sides and actually really weigh together both sides, as I would say, both sides of the coin. So think about the priorities. What are your priorities? What is it that really, truly matters to you? So, and what is it that you value most? So that as we're looking at, how would we respond to that particular trade-off if we chose one action over another? She's so cute. So another ground rule that I want to invite you to remember is we want to encourage everybody to participate. Your point of view, what you're thinking, what you're feeling is really important. And to have that in this space is...
Hey, they said 7.
Then, as we have promised, there'll be no cameras other than the video, and there will be no photos showing up on any website or any social media. These videos will only be used by the researchers to see what our outcome is. And I will say this real quickly. Our outcome, and at the end of this, you're going to have a survey to complete. And it's going to be urgent that everybody complete it. You don't have to put your name on it, but complete the survey because it's an important part of the research. And our conversation and your responses on the survey will become a part of the compilation for the whole nation. And when the public voice is held, and that's an event that is held in Washington every year after these discussions have been held across the country, the compilation then is shared with policymakers and their staffs in Washington. So we'll be a part of that along with the other 9 sites that are participating in the research. So NIF is the only one that will hold the video. Again, thank you for being here and being part of this. We want to thank our convener and hosts, United Citizens Power, for hosting this event. And I know Michelle is going to talk about possible future events later. Okay, so, let there be light.
Could be like for 10 minutes?
Or
That's all
10 or
right.
15, but
15 minutes, that's all right?
Okay, all right. Last week you said that the environment was a safe environment. Well, you created that safety. You created that safety by jumping in, participating, and going for it at 100,000%.
respectfully.
I'm sorry.
And being respectful.
And yes, and being respectful of one another, etc. And having your views and having those views be different and still being able to hear what others had to say. So that is important. One of the things that we didn't do is you were creating your own safe space, so to speak, is that we didn't probe you a lot. It'll be different tonight. Just to keep us thinking and expanding our thinking and learning with and learning from one another. So I want to take a minute. The first minute I'm going to take is just have you say your name. It's always good to get your name and your voice in the space that we're working in. So just quickly say who you are.
Bill Perkins.
Tina Taylor?
Travis Taylor. Chris Hayes.
Valerie Boykin.
Jorge Lopez.
Our comedian of the group here. It's Jermaine.
Hazel Leo.
I'm Bruce Copeland.
Tom Dawson.
Sean Kehoe.
Steve Turner.
Lindsay Turner.
Rich Green.
Jonette Ragsdale.
Lisa Jackson.
Michelle Joyce?
At Harbor.
One more? Oh, yeah.
Valerie Fields.
Oh, I didn't see Valerie there. Great. And you remember Harry and Nia. So, okay.
Oh, Laverne?
Laverne.
Good birthday. That's right, you sat last time, right?
You singing? Aren't you in the circle, Laverne?
You're in the circle, right?
Come on in
You're in the
the
circle.
circle.
If you were in the circle last time, sorry, y'all, I gotta be in the circle.
We need your voice.
We need your voice.
Yeah, it's really important to, when we lose one voice, we've lost the perspective. And so I'm really grateful for
Laverne Davis.
Thank you, Laverne.
Thanks, Laverne.
And college grad.
So I don't know how many of you have been wondering, like I have been over the last week, about what we talked about last time. Good. I see some heads nodding. I'd like to know, what have you been wondering? What reflections did you have from between these two sessions? Just go.
Last week, a great suggestion was made about giving every illegal immigrant a green card. But it's like they put wolves in the Rockies that came from Canada. How do you track the wolves? You give 11 million green cards out, how do you track that?
Give them a social security card.
Well, the other thing is, right now, if a guy doesn't have a green card, he's in demand because he can't demand a basic minimum wage. He has to work for less than that. So that guy who has a watermelon field and needs people to pick the watermelons, he's not going to want these guys to have a regular green card and charge minimum wage. He's going to lose money. What I'm thinking is we could issue an alternative green card, like the green card A. And this green card has stipulation that one, it had its own special minimum wage. They're not citizens, they don't deserve that right as a citizen. However, they should get some protection and some reward for trying to participate in the workforce. So you would, instead of having the regular minimum wage, you might say your new minimum wage is $7. It makes them affordable for agricultural help. It gives them a living wage, which is probably better than what they were making. It also lets them participate in things like Social Security, and Medicare, Medicaid later on. Now, the second pitch to this is now that they are able to report their wages, in fact, they have to. And one, you go to the people who normally hire these guys, and you stipulate the penalty now for hiring someone without a green card is much more severe.
Penalties
Because
are now.
there ain't no excuse for it now, okay? So you up the penalty for hiring illegally. In turn, you say, in order to keep your alternate green card status and progress to a regular green card status, we're gonna look at your Social Security each year. If it doesn't hit a certain level, then we're gonna send you away. You go right back where you came from.
All right. Now, I hear you just roaring over there to chime
No, but-
in. And please tell me your name, I can't see.
Tom.
Tom, thank you, Tom.
Pat, and I can't see your name tag either.
Thank you, yes.
The system we have now, the people, the people who are the jefes, the bosses, they get paid the lump sum money in cash. They give some to the more educated people who have Social Security, but the illegals are getting 50% of what the money that's been set aside, and the money is going back into the jefe's pocket. As
The whose pocket?
the cash, the people are paid in cash. The worker is exploited by the people that he works for, not the employer, but the people he works with, the group he works with. That's just common knowledge. Yeah. They have e-verification. All you got to do is call up and give them a Social Security number. There's enough penalties if you enforce the law. And it's like every other law. If you enforce all the immigration laws, there's enough laws on the books to enforce. We don't need to generate another set of laws just for this. Just set up a system. People say, well, we just get rid of 11 million. This article says, and a couple articles I've read, say there's maybe as many as 22 million people here that are illegal aliens. There's not a finite number. The problem is that you can't get rid of 11 million or 22 million people. You have to come up with a system that will make them keep track of it. The best way is to make them legal immigrants. The best way to keep track of their income is to give them a Social Security card. And that tracks everything. And then from there, you start making laws like, okay, now you have to become a naturalized citizen in 5 or 10 years. And you follow the same system that we already have established. You background check these people the same way the DOD background checks every person too. It's not hard to do. The system's already set up. Just take advantage of the systems you already have and work these people into the economy, into the legal economy. Once upon a time, this nation used to buy from itself. The immigrants came in and they lived in an Italian neighborhood. They bought from the Italians. The Polish bought from. You buy from yourself. If you buy from yourself, you get a multiplying effect about 2.8 times. For every dollar you put in the economy, you get a multiplying effect of 2.8 times. These people say, well, we're sending money back to our family. Those people, you're not going to stop that. All of Cuba's hard-earned dollars are sent to them from the United States. You can't stop that, but that's the motivation for these people being here and working hard. And you don't want to take away that motivation. I drove by this little place that's being built behind Food Lion off of Bridge Road. There's one framing crew out there working nights and Sundays, and they're Hispanic, they're Mexicans or South American, and they're the only ones out there working. I built my own house, and they worked 5 days a week and no Saturdays and Sundays. And if it rained, they didn't come back and work Saturday or Sunday. Those people are working in the rain. They're working hard. They're motivated. Don't control the amount of money they make. They should be paid in a legal system for what they're worth, and we should be willing to pay a legal price for that service, and for the value that they add.
So I'm hearing two people wondering about welcoming everybody. Is there anybody that feels different with either a tracking system with Social Security or green cards? Is there anyone that feels differently or wants to say more about that?
I think part of your challenge is going to be pick one. Now do it. We have a system today that's broke because we have a political environment that swings left and right all the time. It depends on where the money goes, how well we enforce. One group now wants to build a wall because they think that's going to solve the problem. If we have another group comes in and decide that's not the right answer, we're going to do something else. But the bottom line, the problem still exists. We haven't solved the problem. Pick a solution. Now execute. And when people say, track folks, good luck. Until you stop the bleeding, the importing, the illegal importing, you're not ever track. It's like taking on water, okay? You'll track some, you'll do well by what you can, but it's a resource that's without limits. You can't track that many people coming in if you don't stop the illegal. Maybe you de-incentivize the illegal traffic, I get you, but good luck with trying to track that many people. We can't track tax-paying citizens right now. So I get what you're coming from, but I think we're living in a purist perspective when we think it's that easy to execute with the environment and the people we're talking about who need to execute that. I challenge that is what I'm saying. No matter what side that you're on.
I agree with, I empathize with what Tom was saying, but I just want to put out a little vignette after Hurricane Isabel. It's been a long time, probably 15 years ago, but I had to have a roofing crew come in to redo my whole house. I had a tree come down on the roof. There was 9 people, one Anglo. They came from North Carolina. He came from North Carolina. He was the one Anglo, and there were 9 Central Americans. Those guys worked there, but just like Tom said, they were working 12 hours a day all over the roof, working their butts off. And I got to talking to them over a period of about 3 or 4 days about their life up here. There were 8 of them. There were 4 to a room in a motel that this guy was paying for their motel room, so they had cots and sleeping on floors or whatever. All 8 of them had the majority of their family still in Central America. They had no incentive whatsoever to be in the quote system because their only desire up here was to make money and wire it back. I don't know how you get around that because I think we've still got a lot of that going on today.
So I think that these are all very interesting points. I was doing some research as well, so I just want to throw it out to the group. We talk a lot about people coming in from south of the border. We talk a lot about Mexican and Central America and South America. But in 2016, the top country of origin of immigrants coming into the country was actually India. Mexico was second, China was third, and Cuba was fourth. There are many people that fly in and overstay their visas.
None of those people are doing roofing.
No, they're not. That's what I'm saying. So we're doing a lot of talk about addressing the problem of roofing, but there are many immigrants in the country who are actually serving in many other capacities. So thoughts?
Now, this is an article in Sunday's paper about immigration in Tidewater, Virginia. And it says, it says that we had 52,000 people leaving. We had 66,000 people that between deaths and everything. So it had a growth of about 8,000 people in this area. We have 34,000 immigrants coming into Tidewater, Virginia. Without immigrants coming into Tidewater, Virginia, we would have a stagnant growth to start with. It says here that first and second generation immigrants founded more than 40% of American companies. It says immigrant workers, legal and illegal, has increased the size of the U.S. economy. Typically, concentrations of foreign-born typically have experienced faster productivity growth. Economists tend to agree that immigration is a net contributor to the economic growth. It says here the current H-1B visa system, which allows companies to employ skilled immigrants, is exploited to displace skilled native-born workers. And that's, but the gist of this article is that immigration helps this country and helps the economy grow.
Okay. Thank you. So who should we welcome? What am I hearing you say in terms of who we should welcome?
I think we should welcome immigrants. I don't think anybody is suggesting we close off our borders and try and root out everybody who doesn't belong here and send them all back where they came from. That would be financially, logistically, and morally wrong. It would be unsustainable. You couldn't do it. I would welcome anybody who wants to come here and wants to contribute. As for who we get rid of, when somebody who is here illegally finds their way into the criminal justice system because they cannot abide by the laws of the country that they're living in, that's who we should send home. If you want to live here, you should earn it.
Does anybody disagree with that? The facilitator has her phone still on.
That's the lights are about to go off.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
It's 7 o'clock, so we're waiting for them to. So any other comments regarding
Well,
Sean's?
I think when we look at this, we have to engineer the system such that when they are here illegally and we want to convert them, that, I'm going to try and think of my eyes shut here,
Okay.
but that we have to make these people still attractive to prospective hirers. And, we have to make certain, right now, if you're an illegal immigrant, you're working for whatever they're going to pay. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So what we need to do is say, we're giving the guy an alternative to a green card, but it's still official. And if you want this guy to work for you, and you need him, we're going to give you the ability to hire him at a lower rate because of his status. And it lets you put this guy on your payroll and still afford to put your product out. It lets him accumulate Social Security. It lets him accumulate points towards health care and citizenship. But it's a little more affordable rate for the guy that has to do the employing. And
Yeah, we don't have to come to a conclusion. Go ahead.
What happens to
I want to hear from some others.
I'm trying to follow your logic. When a person who says, I feel displaced by that guy because the wage that you're paying that guy to do this work is criminal, when you know that that work should be paid a certain status, I'm not going to work for $7 an hour. That's a $9 an hour job, and you and I both know it. but you won't hire me, you'll hire the $7. That's
Well,
good economics for you, I get it.
I see what you're saying, but if you're an illegal immigrant right now.
No, I'm legal, and you're talking about hiring an illegal for
Yeah,
$7.
the thing is that I doubt if they're gonna hire the illegal immigrant to do your job in the first place.
They're gonna hire the person in the middle ground that you've given the
You know,
green
they,
card A to instead.
you know, they're gonna look at the guy who's just gonna be like, he was a migrant worker, he's still a migrant worker, we're just gonna recognize his effort, but he's gonna do the things you won't do. I would assume, maybe I'm wrong, but, you know, we're looking at people right now that there are 11 million of them, and a lot of them can't get work anywhere, and if they can, like he said, they're being taken advantage of.
Right.
Okay, this says, okay, employer, you can hire this guy to pick your cotton or to pick your watermelons. You were paying the guy $5 an hour before not reporting it, and that was illegal.
Right.
Now you're gonna pay him $7 an hour because that's his minimum wage, and that is legal. It still gives you a break on their payroll, so you can afford to hire this guy. But he's not gonna hire that guy to teach his kids in school.
Right.
He is gonna hire that guy to do that typical work that the guys did before that didn't have green cards. And, you know, I think that's a minimum wage. That's not a maximum wage.
All right, we don't want you to don't worry about coming to a conclusion right now. What are some of quickly, just what would be some of the drawbacks or the trade-offs for if we give everybody a green card or we have everybody come through Social Security and we track them? What would be the trade-off? It seems like the ones that you say, what I'm hearing, I think I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the workers, those who would contribute to the society, are the ones that I'm hearing you say you would welcome.
Yeah,
Absolutely. You disenfranchise.
And I hear a voice, a female voice over there. Is that Jermaine?
And then Chris.
Okay.
So, my question, I mean, I hear your question, but if it's okay for people to come on an H-1B visa, if that's already a route that's established for employers to hire skilled labor, then why can't there be something like that to hire people who are unskilled? I mean, there's already a system in place to do that. Those people are vetted, I'm sure, and they go through a process. So if there is a method and a way for that to happen, then I think it reduces any exploitation, because I think that's huge. When someone is being exploited, that's a human rights issue. And so, I mean, I would not want to agree to anything that will allow anyone to be exploited. You know, if the job is $10 an hour, then the person should be paid $10 an hour, not $7 or $6 an hour, because they are technically being exploited, but we want to call it something else. I think that, putting a system in place for unskilled, and I think there was a time when that was the case, where unskilled labor was able to come here, people as nannies, people who were in the food service industries and so forth. I remember that being a way and a method for getting people to come and work in America. So I would suggest maybe utilizing that, since it's already in place, just maybe tweaking it so that it will provide what's necessary for the unskilled laborer.
Chris?
To the question of what the impact, I see the impact is everything's going to cost you more at some level, right? So the price of locally grown goods is going to go up because it costs more to bring them to harvest. The cost of having your roof put on is going to cost more. And in most of these cases, the illegal immigrants aren't independent contractors going and getting a paycheck. They're subcontractors to someone who's got a green card, or someone who is a licensed contractor who is doing all by the books, so the employer is paying the bills is in the clear, and the guy who's hired on to do the job to a certain degree is in the clear. People who are turning the wrenches and swinging the hammer and picking the crops aren't, because again, he's exploiting them. So there's a catch-22 to bringing them out of shadows, because now you bring them out of shadows, and now the work's not getting done on Sunday, and it's costing you more, and it's costing you union wages and minimum wages, etc. And if you just give a carte blanche to everybody here, come in, we're gonna plug you in, then you've incentivized those people who came here illegally at the expense of those people who were trying to come in illegally, who were in that backlog, who were taking years to get in.
And to add to what you just said, we're making an assumption that every one of those people we're talking about wants to, quote, be in the system. And I don't think we can make that assumption. There's a lot of folks, like the example I gave, there's a lot of folks here that they don't want to be in the system because there's a cost to them in terms of participating in Social Security and contributing to, their retirement, whatever.
So what do we do with those people then?
Well, what do we do with them? I don't know.
You're saying cheap wages from somebody who's worked with Hispanic workers and I mean, we hired some in a company I worked with, H2B. We paid $5,000, $15,000 to get a group of folks in. 20 of them in, we ended up with about 12 that stayed, and about the rest of them split. They went somewhere else. We worked some that didn't have any skills. Some of them were able to drive, had a driver's license, and you paid those guys accordingly, or they were going to leave. And so you say cheap labor, but I've never worked with one or worked for me that made less than minimum wage. And a lot of them made top dollar because they were good workers, and that's what they were worth. I had gentlemen that worked with me at the tree company, and I mean a well-known tree company, large, national, East Coast, up and down the East Coast, and these guys probably weren't legal, but they had the legal paperwork like Tom says. There's legal paperwork that you can purchase that says you're legal, and those guys get paid top dollar. So when you say legal, when you say cheap wages, I'm not working on no farm, but out here roofing and doing jobs like that, those guys are making just as much as everybody else.
So what about incentivizing the employers and making it, giving the employers or those individuals that would hire people to do the work, what about incentivizing them, maybe a tax credit or, other ways of incentivizing, so so that those folks that would want to consider hiring people who can work for less wages would be incentivized to be able to now hire people who are maybe H-2B visas and so forth. So incentivizing the employers so that they're not going against what is standard, and they're still getting good employees and still getting their work done and still able to keep their costs down. So then it becomes a system that, if a person would not, if you look at it from the other perspective as well, there would be, people would be flocking elsewhere because coming here would not be the place to come if you want to, quote unquote, work in a legal system and, like you said, save your money and send it back. That's not going to happen. That person wouldn't exist in that type of system because the system would be such that wouldn't be attracted to them. They wouldn't even, no one would hire them because there's a great pool of people who qualify in the other system.
Thank you. I'm going to cut you off if you don't mind, Rich, because this has been rich. Richard, this has been rich.
This is an unscheduled blackout.
Cut Rich off.
You showed us.
Continue, we're going to continue this, but we're going to go to option 2. Thank you for all the incredible points you've raised and some of the tension that I see in beginning here. And I think when you get into option 2 and 3, you'll be able to move more. In some ways, we've almost
We've started.
we've been on option 2.
We've started, right? So option 2 is enforce the law, be fair to those who follow the rules. This option says that we need a fair system where the rules are clear and above all enforced. Ever since the nation's first immigrant policies were put in place, the premise has been to welcome newcomers in an orderly way, but with an estimated 11 million people living in the country illegally, our current system is unjust and uncontrolled. And without going through all of it, a primary drawback to that would be, or could be, this will harm millions of people now living in our communities and contributing to our society. it will spread fear in cities and towns nationwide. So that is a potential drawback. So some of the actions we've actually already started to delve into. The first one is identify people who enter the country illegally and deport them. So we touched on that a little bit last week about the reality of being able to deport 11 million or maybe even more people. To require police officers to check a person's immigration status if there's reasonable suspicion. To prosecute employers who hire workers illegally, that came up already. We haven't talked much about sanctuary cities, so to cut off federal funding to sanctuary cities that refuse to cooperate with the federal immigration agents seeking to locate or deport undocumented immigrants. And the last one being to build a secure wall, hire more patrol agents, and tighten security. So with each of those, of course, there is a drawback, and I won't go into each one of those. I hope that you have had a chance to read them. But for some of the ones we haven't talked about already, for example, if police officers check every immigrant or person that they suspect to be an immigrant, this could hamper law enforcement by making immigrants afraid of reporting crimes, talking to police. It also could lead to racial profiling. For sanctuary cities, this could undermine local authority and police and drive away many immigrants who do contribute to society. And then, of course, if we're talking about the wall, this will cost billions of tax dollars and fails to address problems with people entering from Canada through airports and people overstaying their temporary visas. It will make it much more difficult for lawful travelers to enter the United States. So having said all that, what would you like to delve into next? What do you want to tackle as far as the things that we just mentioned?
Well, option 2 seems to be what the government is trying to enforce now.
Could we get you to speak up a bit?
I said option 2 appears to be what the government is trying to enforce now. And we see some of the ramifications to that in the news all the time. The last comment you read, I think about people trying to enter the country illegally. It can create problems. I have a friend, an acquaintance, who happens to be of mixed race and origin, part Italian, part Somalian. He's a long-term U.S. citizen, a former police chief of a city who was doing international work, left the country and was detained for 4 hours, trying to return to his home. So I think some of these options, and 2, people are taking it too far, and it's actually hurting people who are legal citizens, and they're being harassed. And so, police officers stopping everyone and asking for identification. We always take our IDs when we go for a walk or a jog. I think there is a risk in public safety and just goodwill in our communities to look at some of the issues, or I guess I should say drawbacks, that would occur with option 2.
All right. So comments, thoughts? Agree, disagree?
I worked for a short time, a couple of years, as a field interviewer for the NUSDA. That's the National Study of Drug Use and Health. It's a federal program, and they hired a company out of North Carolina to put people in the field to go and screen households to see if they had the right makeup for an interview. And we would interview these people with a computer, and they would answer about an hour's worth of questions. We give them $30 for their time. We were civilians, not government employees, and we would be amazed, and I particularly would, because I had Newport News and Norfolk, and I had some areas where they had these trailer parks. And I would go and knock on a door, and the immediate assumption was I was IMS. And people would scramble all over that place, trying to hide from me. I don't think we understand in this room how big this is, and how many people there are that are here illegally, and what skills they have developed to avoid detection. And I don't blame them. But I think rather than try and enforce a law that's not quite right as it is, we do need to change the laws and make these people, incentivize them to join the club and to play by the rules. Okay, we're not doing that. And instead, we're trying to catch people doing something wrong in our country. It will not work. Hasn't worked yet and never will work.
We haven't caught them either.
Huh?
We haven't caught them either.
You know, it's just, there are a lot of people out there and they have every reason in the world to avoid detection. And we need to build a system that says, you're here. We need to also enhance the system so that we don't promote more coming in. I agree with that. But I don't think that the rate of immigration right now from the South, from Latin American countries, I don't think that is as great as it was in the past. They were coming here looking for jobs. We're sending jobs to Mexico and Argentina and Brazil. And there is work down there. But, this was the promised land. They're here and...
But we're not sending jobs to Central America.
Pardon?
We're not sending jobs to Central America, and that's where they're coming from, not from
Yeah,
Mexico.
look at the migrant caravan.
Guatemala, Honduras,
El Salvador.
I mean, look at the migrant caravan that's on its way. I mean, we're just supposed to say, welcome all of them without any background checks or anything, just let them come in? I mean,
No, don't let them come in. But we've already got them here is what I'm talking about.
How do we enforce it then?
How do we enforce the border?
The law. The law or the border or
Right, what do
whatever
we
it
do
is,
about
what
the
we do
caravan?
about the caravan.
I might not have an answer for that.
Anyone else?
I have read that the government is mobilizing military troops to go down and reinforce the border. That's something that has been done in the past with the National Guard. And I can't say I disagree with that. We've got to do something. The border's pretty porous as it is. And you've got to, there are too many people in this world who would wish to do harm to us as Americans. Just because we're Americans.
If we did that, what would be one of the trade-offs? What, if we took that action, what would be the
Oh, we're
consequence?
gonna get condemnation from the UN and everything else, but what's new about that? They let Sudan wag their finger at us for our human rights record on the Human Rights Council, which is a joke.
But what's interesting is
Bruce,
that,
speak up a little bit,
what's
please.
interesting is that the data does not bear out this fear. It does not bear it out. This gentleman just read an article that showed a discrepancy in what people believe and what is reality. And so I'm not understanding why people are so gullible and susceptible to believing myths that when you present them with data that tells you clearly this is not true, they choose to believe the myth. We're talking about people who would do us harm. The data does not bear out that it's immigrants coming to this country that pose a risk to our safety. It's people in this country. So we talk about the caravan, but we say nothing about this bomber.
11 guys who did 9/11 were illegally.
We're talking about one incident, and we can go on and talk about native-born people who have done damage and have put people at risk in this country for their safety. So clearly, most people are attracted to this fearful story about some caravan coming through. But at the same time, I don't know who sent these bombs, but if I were a betting man, I would suggest that it's probably not an immigrant that's a part of a caravan or somebody from South America, wherever we believe that they're coming from, somebody U.S. born.
No, two different stories. You're talking about a bombing, you're talking about 14,000 people coming up to invade your country.
A good portion of MS-13, one of the most bloodthirsty gangs in the United States, are illegal immigrants from Central America.
Okay.
And they're victimizing minority communities. They're victimizing themselves. Lawful and peaceful immigrants. That's a fact.
The data that is available to everyone does not support the fear, it does not support the myth about, and it's almost like when we're talking about this, we assume it's always from a negative perspective. You know, probably in any group of people that exist here in this country legally, and those who come illegally, they're good and bad people in both groups. And I would not suggest that the majority of those people are wanting to come here to harm. And even with this, even with
suggesting
I'm not suggesting that either.
There's probably 2% of bad people in the 14,000 that's coming, but how can you tell?
well, we were doing pretty good.
We already got the 2% here, we were born here.
We were
But how do you tell?
around 1%.
You can't.
Yeah,
And now, so I'll
no,
just
that's a
them all
good
out.
point.
I'll just
If we
keep
could just
them all
let
out.
Bruce finish and then we'll, so that we're not cross-talking, so. Bruce, you want
I almost forgot my point, but I thought we were doing pretty good. We did great last time, we were doing good this time, but I think when everybody's talking over each other, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So I'm willing to listen to what other people have to say, but when given the opportunity, I would appreciate the same respect.
I mean, I haven't heard personally, a lot of fear. I mean, there was, one or two anecdotes about crime or threats to this country, but most of it's just about, again, an unchecked, that we're just going to wave a white flag and let 15,000 people be pushed into the country without the, the ability to absorb that. And we can't absorb people that are sneaking across the border. We can't absorb people that are trying to get in. So just to say, well, this problem's too hard, let's just let the caravan through without having the, the capacity to absorb that. I mean, based on fear, but it's not, I don't think it's based on fear of security or the bad people. It's based on fear of not being able to assimilate them, not being able to process them, not being able to check to see which ones are the bad apples. Not fear they're gonna,
Well, good apples for that matter.
Yeah.
People I can use to do good things with.
Good point.
So I mean, for me, you have there's there is a fear issue, absolutely. But I think the whole question of controlling immigration, we're still not hitting it. We're hitting the fears and concerns, but 14,000 people come to a country, not paying taxes potentially. We got to absorb that, and we have to have infrastructure for that, and hospitals and healthcare and food and all the things that go to sustain 14,000 people. Who's going to pay for that?
Right.
We're not taxing them.
But you guys are hearing numbers that I'm not hearing.
Yeah.
So the last thing I heard was 7,000 and almost half of them.
It could be 1,000, it could be 10, it could be 5, it doesn't matter the number, I'm just saying,
Let's let
we're,
one person speak at a time.
But that's a huge difference.
I agree, but
14,000 down to one.
every day there are people coming in
Well, we
to the
have-
infrastructure that we're not accounting for.
absorbed them. They're here. We have already absorbed them. If we allow them to participate in the economy the same way that everyone else participates, it works itself out. They contribute to the economy. We talked about people coming here and earning money for work that they've done, hard work that they've done. It's their money when they earn it. And we have an issue with them sending it back home. It's their money. When we earn our money, we get to do with what we want to do with it. We get to use it the way we want to. So I'm not even sure why, if they send money home to their family, which is what normal people who care about their families any place in the world would do, why that's an issue.
If we could just also bring out now, when you mentioned the coming across the border and how do my understanding is many of those people are going to be applying for asylum, right? So that's a vetting process, it's a long process. What are your thoughts on that? When the caravan gets to the border, there is a process for people. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
If the process is effective, I think that's what we all want. We want a system to manage what's coming, so we can do right by people, so they won't get exploited, so they can have the opportunities, so we'll know if we're getting good folks to put to work, education, the whole nine. I don't really care what system it is. I want a system that's effective, right? That's the problem. We have a system in place right now that's ineffective. So just letting them in and not contributing to the infrastructure to support them is a problem. I mean, yeah, they'll earn money, but if they're not paying taxes, someone has to support the infrastructure that people occupy. So if we can figure that out, then that's part of a new, better system. Sounds good to me. But that's not what's currently happening.
Well, it's clear that you guys or is it clear that you guys are seeming to say we do need a better system than the one we have. Did I go with that? Okay. So now, what do we do then to enforce what we have until we get a better system? Do we deport people who are undocumented and who may be in the country illegal? Do we have police arrest them? Look at some of those actions on your form there, or maybe you got some others. Do we cut off federal funding in those sanctuary cities? What do we do to enforce the situation?
Maybe, I can see where cutting off funding to sanctuary cities could be problematic. You still have people who depend upon the federal funding for the community services. But I think when the mayor of Oakland sends out communications aimed at all the illegal aliens, warning them that ICE is coming in to do a sweep, I think that's actionable. I don't see how that could be permitted. There were a lot of people who were convicted criminals in that group that didn't get collected and dealt with and are still at large in the community. I don't have the right answer, but we do need a more workable system.
So now, what are your thoughts on that? Do you find that as, do you all have a different
I got a little
perception of
A little bit
sanctuary
more
cities,
moderate
or-
approach, I think. I don't think we have the resources, ICE or whoever, to go after every illegal that's in this country. Certainly we don't. I don't think we have the money or the resources, or God knows we don't need a wall. But if you do, somebody brought it up over here, if you do wrong, okay, if you break the laws, the existing laws of this country, and you're here illegally, you're out. But beyond that, I think if they're contributing to society, if they're paying taxes, which most are, I think.
They're at least paying sales tax, because they're buying
Sales-
stuff.
Sales tax at a minimum, but, yeah.
So can I ask, when you say break the law, what laws are we talking? Are we talking, obviously, violent
No, I'm not
crimes?
talking about-
Are we talking about the
I'm not
traffic
talking about
stop?
I'm not talking about illegal immigration laws, because they're here. I mean, that's a fair
Domestic
probably.
abuse, drug
But,
abuse, drug
yeah.
Traffic
dealing.
stops? Because that's what's happening today.
Stop.
So-
Felonies
that's a
in
tough one.
certain
That's-
classes.
Some are getting
misdemeanors.
deported because of
Because of
traffic
traffic
stops.
stops.
No, he's getting deported for speeding. Otherwise, we don't get in trouble.
Well,
But they are.
Well,
They are
they're
now.
not getting deported because they're illegal.
Depends
They
on.
got caught because they got a
That's
traffic
right.
violation. They're getting deported because they were broke, the principal law they broke was being here illegally. So that's enforcing the law.
Yeah, you go.
And I get it, if we want to draw lines, we want to have a path to bring those people out of the shadows and integrate them into society as U.S. citizens, which I think is the right thing to do, then probably there needs to be a line where, if you get the speeding ticket, we bring you in and we give you here's the book, here's the process, here's how you get on the path to becoming a citizen who buys all the way in, not just paying sales tax. Because I had a good friend who was a Navy pilot, and we joked because he was a Navy pilot making good money. He had a mattress. He had those, everybody see those fold together like file cabinets. That's what he had for furniture, the cardboard stuff. And he had a scuba tank, and that was it. Every bit of his money went home to his family in Ireland. He was an Irish immigrant, right? But he was paying income tax. He was paying into health care. He was paying into Social Security. His kids weren't going to school in a system that he wasn't supporting. He wasn't going to draw Social Security that he hadn't paid into for his whole life. So there's a subtle difference. So being able to pull those people into being whole contributing members of society, which is going to cost everybody else a little bit somewhere. But I think so there's three problems: fix the legal immigration process, streamline that so we can get the people who want to come here safely. Stop the inflow to the extent we can of illegal immigration. That's going to be painful to everybody too. There'll be those cases, those onesie-twosie cases, but then find that path that strikes a middle ground for people who are here legally to keep them here legally.
So should we have a blanket policy about the deportation with any charge? Or should there also be some type of vetting or review process there? I'll give you an example of a teenager.
You could vet anybody that's been here for 20 years. There's a whole system.
So let me give you an example of a teenager.
We could vet these people that are here.
I mean, who, if they commit a crime. So I'll give you the example and ask you to just ponder this thought. A teenager is involved with the wrong people, gets charged with and convicted of a very serious charge. And I can't give, and this is a real story, so I can't give you details. ICE has a detainer on her as soon as she is released from a juvenile facility. She's going to be sent back to a country she's never lived in
That's right.
since she was 3-4 months old. Her family's here. There's no one there for her. Do we believe in redemption? Do we believe in reentry? Do we re-enter her in a country she's never lived in? So that's why I say, do we need a blanket law? We have a blanket law that if you're convicted of felony, you get deported. But is that the best thing for her? Is that the best thing for us as a society?
Well, there are going to be exceptions to every rule that.
Our law, the law of the land is that crimes committed before the age of 18 are not supposed to be carried over into your adult life, unless it's a,
Unless you're
tried in circuit
no
court.
more.
Wait a minute, I can't hear you over here. I said that's not the law all the time.
But that is the law of the land.
You know, a lot of children tried in circuit court, and sometimes they come back to us.
As an adult.
As an adult.
That's right, as an adult.
But actually, ICE puts detainers on juveniles in the juvenile court. As soon as they get wind of a charge.
Then we don't have a uniform law that's enforced.
Well, when we, sometimes it says that if we identify people who are in the country illegally and deport them and require that they reapply for entry, then one of the trade-offs is that we separate them from their families and we pull families and communities apart. And I kind of was thinking, is that where you were also headed, particularly with this youth?
It's similar to, is it Chris who said, just like the traffic stop, the kids may not be deported because of their crime, but once they find out, and they watch and they find out who they are because of some other type of arrest. And they've been sent away and they know no one in that country. And we know from, just if you listen to the stories of the folks who are asking for asylum, who are a part of that caravan, that's why, because of the use and such.
Now, I heard some agreement and disagreement here before we move on to option 3, because we keep carrying this on. But what were some was there anything here that we agreed on? Was there something, what was it that we disagreed on? Where do you see some tensions in this enforcement?
If you go down this realistically, for one, you can identify all the illegal aliens. You can't deport them. You couldn't afford to deport them. You can control the policemen just by saying don't profile and train them and train them and train them, and you will get a better police officer in the street. You can prosecute anybody that doesn't e-verify employment, and that's easy to do. As far as, if you go down to the last one, any elected official, local officials have to pledge to the city, to the state, and to the country. So if you're not enforcing the laws of the city, of the state, and of the country, then why would they be supported by federal funds or state funds, for that matter, or by tax dollars at all? They're supporting something that's illegal.
The state of New York has, or New York City has this resident card where if you live in the city of New York, you can actually apply for a city resident card, which establishes you as living within the city. And it allows for folks who are compromised with regard to their legal status to be able to open a bank account and to be able to enroll their children in school and so forth. And that seems to be making a huge difference in the city. The challenges with that is, with the sanctuary city, I don't know how it, you know, how it works with regard to that, but it is making a significant difference for those who are living and working and are challenged with regard to their status. So maybe, I don't know what the actual progress, or I should say the numbers are with regard to how progressive it is, but it could be something that's been, it's something that's been happening for, I think, maybe a year or two. If looking at those numbers, seeing if it's something that works, and then maybe using that as a pilot and maybe seeing if it will work in other states. That's a thought, you know.
Did you have a, before we move on?
The points are valid, but I still haven't heard enough to say, how do we stop the bleeding? This is how we do the triage. That part works for me. Any of these methods work for me. I think they make sense. But if I were to go to Britain, or let's say Spain or Germany, and 10,000 people were walking to enter, or let's just say I'm already there and I did something, I don't think there'd be a question about how quickly I'd be returning to America. Okay, so we gotta fix the bleeding is what I'm saying. The triage and the path to citizenship, many of these things said make sense. We can go down these roads and make sense, show the empathy that people deserve. But until we have a system that can at least manage the controlled coming occupation of the country, we're never going to be able to sustain or grow smart.
Actually,
I think you're onto it, okay? And when I was in the Army, we had a fire base outside of Cameron. And it was a couple of pieces of large towed artillery. And then we had a 40 millimeter duster, okay? Out in front of that fire base, they cleared all the land for about a mile. They did that to make it more difficult for the other guys to infiltrate. You could see them a long way off. They didn't want to tunnel for a mile, so they didn't bother doing it, okay? If they wanted to have an all-out assault, you were ready for them, and you could see it coming. I have not seen the entire border of Texas or California or Arizona. I've seen parts of it. And my understanding is that there are parts of this border area that mile from the border inward to the United States that offer an awful lot of good hiding places. It's terrain where they can tunnel in for 100 feet, come up, pop up in the middle of a little patch of woods. And that's hard to patrol. I think the wall is absurd. I really think it's a bad plan. You can dig under it, you can fly over it, they'll be catapulting each other over it, okay? However, if they would take parts of that border, maybe not all of it, just experiment with parts of it, and grade a 1 mile perimeter, 1 mile deep, for that portion of the border, so that it was flat and open, no cover, no hills, no gullies, flat and open. It'd be much easier to patrol.
But didn't we say earlier that most people are coming here overstaying their visas, they're flying in? Didn't we talk about that earlier?
Yeah, not most.
Well, wait a second. I thought that's what I heard in this group earlier, when we talked about, I don't know if Lisa gave some data about how most people enter this country.
that was in 2016. The top countries of origin of immigrants who came into this country were from India, Mexico, China, and Cuba. The numbers were about 125,000 from each of the countries, except for Cuba, it was only 40,000. So the numbers were actually very close to the numbers of people. Now, that is 2016 numbers. I've seen numbers as high as 400,000 people a year from Mexico.
And we don't, let me finish. We don't border India, correct? We don't border India.
No.
So what I heard was correct. But it seems like our attention is always drawn to maybe the Mexican border. And we kind of get stuck there. Although the gentleman said that the wall is ridiculous, some people believe that, but there are a whole lot of people who don't believe it's ridiculous. You can sell them anything. It's not logical in any way, shape, or form, everyone's attention is diverted to the Mexican border, when the data doesn't, these people do come across the border, we do get that, they do come across the border. But when you look at all the people that immigrate here, and you look at the countries from which they come the most, we don't necessarily border those countries. So coming across the Mexican border is a problem. That's not to minimize that. But it seems like that's where we get stuck. And I'm just wondering why that's the only, I shouldn't say it's the only, but it seems like it's always the hot spot that we go to when we talk about immigration. It's to the Mexican border.
Well, point of entry for those people, though.
I don't have the point of entry for this. I will, let me just add this other statistic that we did see, that we have 45 million foreign travelers that come into the country every year. 45 million foreign travelers, so they're here on vacation, and that we have about 400,000 people a year that come in and remain illegally, is the numbers that I saw.
Just because I was struck by the,
they're not coming over a wall, they're flying it here.
But did they follow the system to enter the country? Whatever system that is, I'm assuming that's
That they
yes.
have- Well, she said no, but some of them aren't.
So the process
You don't
is there,
fly in
it's
here
not
illegally.
exactly.
Right.
You do not fly in here illegally.
No, you overstayed.
Okay.
And when you overstay your visa, then you're here illegally.
Right.
You might not have flown in here illegally to begin with. You might have followed a legal process that became illegal when you overstayed your visa.
Well, one of the things that we can't do in this group is find the magic bullet,
Right.
okay?
And Chris has another point here that,
well, yeah, so my, so this is the statistics we got, which is, select business statistics. So that's the same charts here, right? It's from the Pew Institute, which fed the research for this. But the same Pew research that led to that says that in 2016, Mexico made up 11.6% of the immigration, China 2.7, India 2.4, Philippines 1.9, El Salvador 1.4. The top 5 countries that were immigrating here. So again, so there's lies, damn lies, and statistics, and I guess we add politics to the back end of that too. So I think, to some degree, and I've got a energetic teenager that loves quoting statistics, but so I make them, hey, go find 4 or 5, and when they match, then we got a meaningful conversation about it, right? Because there's got to be some rigor in it, and you got to be able to trust it, because otherwise, I can quote the statistic that supports my view and my argument. So I think the statistics matter, but overall, there's still, even if you take the numbers away, there's still a problem that we have to address.
I think we can all agree with that, absolutely. So let's move on to, okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Going back to the question you asked before about was there something that we all seem to have agreed upon? And everybody shook their head when you said, do we need a better system, a system that works? And it was like, so that's the one thing that everybody agreed on.
But what that system is another question, right? Okay, let's just talk about, and this really played in, I think, to what Richard was talking about a little bit, so you can tell me if I'm wrong. But option 3 is slow down and rebuild our common bonds. This option recognizes that newcomers have strengthened American culture in the past, but the current levels of immigration are so high and the country is now so diverse that we must regain our sense of national purpose and identity. We need to moderate the flow of immigrants and focus more on assisting newcomers as they join American society. We should have a measured immigration policy, one that reduces the rate of immigration and ensures that immigrants become part of the American culture. Now, a primary drawback to that could be this option would rob us of the energy and hard work people from around the world bring to the United States. In many cases, immigrants are more grateful for the freedoms and opportunities of this country than people who were actually born here. Some of the possible actions: reduce the number of legal immigrants admitted to the country each year, give preference to immigrants who already speak English, restrict family reunification, some people call it chain migration, to spouses and young children, and concentrate on admitting immigrants who will work in areas where we need them. Rather than focus on providing bilingual school programs, schools should ramp up efforts to help newcomers learn English and enhance curricular efforts to learn about American culture and democratic values. And the last one, welcome refugees fleeing political and religious persecution while making sure they are not all resettled in the same place, which overburdens a community's ability to provide the help that the refugees need and makes it harder for them to become part of the community. Now, the drawbacks you hopefully have all read, so I won't go into all of those, but for example, when we talk about family reunification, a drawback could be this would split immigrant families apart, forcing people who came here who come here to leave loved ones behind, sometimes in danger and poverty. Or, for example, if we're talking about refugees, it says, this would require more communities to accept and welcome the newcomers that come. So, what are your thoughts on this slow down and rebuild our common bonds?
Looking at those actions that Lisa just read, you all have this on your chairs.
Do you think any mother or father wants their child taught in their native language, or do you think they want to be taught English and integrated into the society and be able to talk in the first grade or kindergarten to their fellow?
What do you think?
I don't know, what's the group thing?
I know that if you put two children together and they don't speak the same language, in less than 5 minutes they'll be talking to each other and they'll be playing and laughing and having fun.
Anybody else?
That's
I mean, they have an ESL program, that's how it used to be, where there would be an ESL program for their child who's coming in, who may not speak the language, to get them to, so that they'll learn how to speak the language. That was the standard.
I think that's a fundamental part of integrating in society, and
English
the
is
first
a
point
second
is removing fear. Is if we can all communicate with each other like we can communicate in here, then you can break down some of those barriers. You can share your common values. You can communicate and understand each other, which you can't do if you're not able to communicate. As adults, particularly. And again, that leads to more fear from lack of understanding, from not being able to get to know the other person. That same Pew thing says that right now, 51% as of 2016, it's on the uptick, but 51% of immigrants are English proficient.
Are English proficient.
English proficient.
When they come to the country, is that what you said?
That are in the country now. So percentage of foreign-born immigrants ages 5 and older who are proficient in English, and they define proficient in English as they speak English at home or they speak another language at home, but they're able to converse in public in English at a, quote, very well level.
As an elementary teacher, one of the things that, and principal, one of the things that we experienced was that children, even elementary children, they were in the English as a second language course, classrooms, but they became the translators for their parents.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think about that?
If you go to Europe, or you go to South America, or you go to Asia, you find a terrific amount of people that are native to those areas that speak English. We don't think it's worth the trouble to learn a foreign language. How many in this room can speak more than one language? Good. Okay. Now, what is the largest nation on earth, population-wise? China. Would it not make sense for everybody in this room to learn Chinese?
Mandarin.
That's our biggest market, but we don't go to the trouble. So when somebody comes over here from China or from Mexico or from India, we insist they learn our language. But when we go to their country, they don't insist we learn theirs.
Bill, did you migrate there and take up residence?
Pardon?
Or did you just visit on vacation?
I couldn't understand you.
Did you migrate there as a permanent resident, or did you just visit? And there's a challenge. We have this conversation I have with at work at home. If I'm English is the global language because we were the global hegemon, right? So we were the one for business and driven by business, and now in business schools it's shifting to Mandarin because they're taking so much of the market. But if I go to 5 different countries in Europe and a couple in Middle East and go to Asia, I can converse in English and get by. But which one of those countries I was going to do I want to become proficient in? If I can go to France, I have to become proficient in France to visit France, and then if I want to go to Singapore, I have to learn Tagalog. it's hard to learn all the language, and maybe it's broadening to learn an additional language, but if you're in a country, that's being a part of that civil society is that you speak the language because you learn values from the language and being able to communicate. I mean, I think that's a fundamental thing that you have to do to become a...
I think we just go by the attitude of, if they're gonna come in here, they gotta speak it on day one. And, you know, if I went to China tomorrow, I wouldn't speak Chinese on day one. I have a brother-in-law who's from Peru, and he still speaks very good English. He's been here 30 years. You know, so it's something that we got to be a little more forgiving that they're going to have to learn this. It's not going to be something that just gets handed to you when you walk across the border.
So Chris, you're saying one of the benefits of having everybody speak English is that they learn to communicate and feel safe by communicating, by using English to learn their peers, etc. So, fine. What is one of the drawbacks to them maintaining their own language?
If it's a primary language, it's going to be a communications problem. I don't think anyone would have a problem with someone speaking in their native language amongst their own folks to communicate. Who cares? But if you're in a bank and I'm trying to do business with you and you don't speak English or you don't have Siri to help me translate, that's a problem. I don't understand the stop signs. And that's just not here. That's anywhere. I could be in another country if I don't understand in French what that means, avec or whatever. I mean, that's a problem for me. So I don't think that's unreasonable to ask a person if you're going to seek residency and citizenship in a country over a period of time to put forth some effort to pick up at least a few of the phrases so you can interact, spend money together and have meals with people and talk to them. Because most people would bring you in, you're trying. Great, I'll work with you.
It's learning English. I mean,
Yeah, you should.
This, officially assimilating in and becoming a citizen, that's part of it, is learning.
Right.
I do have a question. You're an educator, so how many illegal immigrants, for instance, that come from, let's say, from Mexico and Central America, are literate in their own country and educated in their own country with 12 years of education or 6 years or whatever? I don't know.
Janelle, I taught in New York City public school system, and I taught in middle school. And many of those students that came to us fresh were literate.
Okay.
And the bilingual program did help them.
Okay.
And so they had two programs set up for them. Their bilingual education, in which they were taught their subject area in their native language. So those kids who were taking 8th grade math, whether it was English or Spanish, had the same curriculum.
Okay.
Those children who were taking history or science had the same curriculum. The ESL portion was teaching them English as a second language. So most of our students did not come illiterate. I'm not saying all, but most of them did not.
Do any schools have second language programs for anything other than Spanish?
Yes,
Where?
in New York City.
Okay.
In New York City.
I believe that.
And probably Northern
That's
Virginia,
what I'm saying.
where I lived in
San
Northern
Francisco,
Virginia.
too.
Florida as well.
They had bilingual programs in French, Arabic, Japanese, Urdu, many different.
I know they have Urdu and Mandarin in Northern Virginia, the school that my daughter was in.
A number of schools have multiple languages, particularly where they have a high number of immigrant or foreign born students.
I mean, we make the assumption that a lot of the immigrants come and they're dirt poor and they haven't had any education at all. Some have it, but for the most part, they do go to school.
There was one of the actions on here that talks about the family reunification. What are your thoughts on that? As it says, some people call it chain migration. That's what you hear in the news, but family reunification is another term for it.
That's the ones, that for me, they're most heartbreaking. They don't want to do this.
Can't hear you, Tina.
Those are valid.
Those are the ones that
I find most heartbreaking. You see it on the news where people are being stripped apart and or unable to reunify. I just find that particularly.
So you talked about the separation.
The separation and or people being unable to reunify. So either way, being separated from loved ones or those who are trying to bring their families here and are not being allowed to under current law, or current interpretations.
I think that should be limited to bringing your kids in. And the reason being, if you look at the typical American family, once you separate from your parents and go off and raise your own family, you have your own family. There is now a distinction between you and your parents.
Right.
They are living their own life. They are where they want to be. They've worked their way into it. And I think for us to say, well, where do we stop? Should they bring their parents? No, I don't think they should. Their parents can visit.
There got to be exceptions to that though, Bill.
Pardon?
There should be. I agree with you principally, but what if you're the provider for your parents?
Oh, that's an exception.
How many of us now have
Yeah.
become
Right.
Yeah.
caregivers for our parents?
No,
But I can
yes.
see that. I can see that.
But conditionally,
But it's
yes.
an individual case that can be worked out. But I think as a rule, you should be able to bring your kids because that's your family you're going to raise.
That's your immediate unit.
But
There's
you're not
also-
going to influence your parents that much more.
There's also big differences though culturally. Some cultures don't have that, they don't go and have dinner with their folks every Sunday or every night. Some cultures do. We live away from home as soon as we can and start our own lives.
Well, you look at
Some people
Asia
stay
where
with
a
their
lot.
parents,
You look at Asia where a lot of
They might not move
kids.
any further away than
and-
next door.
Yeah, you look at Asia where a lot of kids end up taking care of their parents and moving
Yes.
their parents in with them. But I don't think that is a big problem here. I think our biggest problem is probably from south of the border, but I don't know.
Is there any disagreement on that?
I disagree. I'm at that age where I'm a caregiver. I have been for years, and I know lots of people that are caregivers, and maybe it's more of a cultural thing here even, but I see it a lot, and I see many people who, there's a term for it, I'm struggling, but you're raising your kids and, what is that?
Oh, yeah.
Sandwich
Generation.
generation where you're caring for two, and I see that more and more. Maybe it hasn't touched your family, or maybe it won't touch your family, but I see a lot of it.
Bruce, did you ask?
No, I just think that we get personally offended, or we try to imply that their differences had some type of extreme adverse impact on this country when it really doesn't. So an example, even with the language, of course it would be great if everybody spoke the same language. It would be easier for everybody, it would be nice. But if somebody is going into a bank and they can't speak English, these people learn how to cope and adapt. As long as they don't ask me to speak Spanish, if I'm working at the bank, I don't feel like I need to speak Spanish. But if there's a Spanish-speaking person who hasn't learned to speak English properly to communicate, and they bring someone with them to help them transact business, why is it my problem? Why is it my problem? Now, it would be nice. Again, people come to the country, they immerse themselves into the culture, they assimilate, and they start to live a lifestyle that's similar to most people, although we are a diverse nation. But nevertheless, there are some common norms that we have. So the more they can assimilate, of course it's better. But we get hung up on, I'm not concerned about them earning their money and sending it back home. It's not my business. I don't see how I'm adversely impacted. And in this community in which I lived all my life, I have not been negatively, adversely impacted by immigration or people from another country. I haven't been a victim of crime from any of them. I have not lost a job to any of them. They have not come into my community and my neighborhood and created problems. And in fact, my interactions with them have been positive. I had a roof replaced on my house. Hardest workers I've ever seen. They were up, they worked hard, nonstop. They even brought their children, set something on the ground for them to sit while they work. So I don't have a fear, a negative perception of immigrants. Now I know there's a lot of attention nationwide in the media creates a narrative that this is a storm coming, this is a big bad condition that we're going to have, and we got to do something. I honestly don't have those emotions tied to immigration. If there should be some things to happen in this country beyond 9/11, because I know we'll go back to that as a default argument for why we shouldn't have people here. But aside from that, if I could see where I was impacted by this, and I work in public education, and we have students that come, one, we admit them whether they're legal, whether they're undocumented or not. They can come into a public school, enroll, and we educate them. We had a student who spoke Arabic. It was amazing how, in 1 year, he was able to speak English. He had immersed himself into the culture. So even with English as a second language in school, I used to think that they grab these kids, put them in a classroom and say, we're going to teach you English. They really don't do that. They allow these children to become immersed in the culture, and they learn. Almost overnight, a year later, he was speaking English better than some of the children his age who had been born here in America. So I know we might have a problem, and maybe we need to have a system that's fixed, but I wonder if we really want to fix the system. Or is there some benefit to not having it fixed? Because if you have people to stop picking grapes in California, what happens to the industry that produces wine? What happens to people who make a ton of money off of undocumented people? Do they really want us to fix the problem, or do they want it to stay this way? And we're having this discussion, but people who control wealth in this country, they might be okay with it the way it is.
Can I ask why you picked the illegal immigrant family to roof to your roof? How did you pick them from all the choices available?
Good question. Where I live, we had that tornado that happened maybe 10 years ago. Had tremendous roof damage. So in order to not be scammed by all of these developers, I took 3 estimates and I vetted them with the State Corporation Commission to vet their license, that sort of thing. And the gentleman who presented himself was a white gentleman, and he had a wonderful presentation, and he also showed me the different types of roofs that I could get.
He's the devil, I believe. Go ahead.
Yeah. and because I vetted him among those 3 and checked the references, he had a reasonable price, and I took him. When they came to do the roof, he disappeared. I never saw him again.
That's why I said that.
I was honestly surprised. I did not know who was going to put my roof on. I had associated my roof being put on by him. And once he got the contract, he didn't come back. And about 5 or 6, I want to say Hispanic people, I don't know if they were documented or undocumented, with their wives and little children, they came. And when I say they took that roof off in an instant and put it back on, and the same thing happened when I had to trim on my house painting. I called a company, and I had a Hispanic gentleman to do the work. And in both instances, it was excellent quality work. No complaints, no concerns.
So the challenge, I was about to say, the challenge is not, and again, becoming a citizen requires that you learn English. So the challenge is not making that compulsory and encouraging that. And again, I get the floral beauty of all the different languages and cultures, but we started off that way in this country, right? You had pockets of people who only spoke Italian, and you had the Irish, and you had the Germans, and there was a lot of tension, and eventually we became the melting pot we are, over the last 150 years, really. Well, this is in the 1890s, right? We had the spike in immigration that created what we are, this multicultural, but we all share a common language, ideally. If you look at Europe, the immigration challenges Europe's having is they're not assimilating the immigrants into the culture. There are enclaves of people from the different countries that set up their own, just like we had, Chinatown and Little Italy, there are those enclaves right now, and it's creating friction, and it's creating immigration, it's creating national problems for them because there are these, walled off areas of the town where police don't go, where, public services they've stopped providing. So I think that's would we ever get there again? No, but that's the beauty of the system that we have now that pulls us all together and forces us to break down some of those barriers so that we don't regress to a point where we have, a sanctuary city that now becomes an enclave for, people from, Sudan who all live there and all speak the same language and all, become a little Sudan that isn't isn't like Little Italy in San Diego where it's a bunch of Italian restaurants, but everybody speaks English, everybody, you know, it's free flowing, but becomes an enclave. So
All right, so Laverne, I think you were going to speak, and then we're going to.
No, I was just validating what Bruce is saying. That's why I said we must have had the same company. But it's like that. You can call, you can vet them. I had 4 people that I vetted, and when I chose them, and they all were white men who came to the home and sat down and did everything. And when I chose the one I chose, and he came that morning, said, "Mrs. Davis, we're here." He said, "If you have any problems, any questions, you just call me." And he was gone. I never saw him anymore. And I had a bunch of, and I don't know, immigrants, you know, I'm not gonna say they were Spanish, Mexican, or what they were. I had a bunch of immigrants, and, you know, sometime I would come out and I would ask, "Are you gonna put the hook up there?" And he said, "You know, me don't get, you don't know English, you know." So, you know, so I tried to point out what I was trying to say, and then I would go back and call, you know, the man I made the contract with, you know, and he said, "Okay, I'm going to call to them." And he called me himself a couple times and said, "I'm trying to reach whoever." And he said, "That's the one that has on the hat that's turned around backwards and the blue belt or whatever." He said, "Can you go out and tell him to call me?" So I would go out and I said, "Mira, call your boss," you know. What more can I say? I mean, I didn't ask for them. I mean, they came, they did a beautiful job. They really did. And quickly.
Thank you. So we're just, at this point, we want to ask, is there anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak that has anything that you want to say before we move into our reflections? Everyone good? We want to make sure everybody's had an opportunity. Okay. So we have come to the end of our 3 options for our immigration conversation. And Michelle, I think, number one, we just have to say, has been awfully quiet back here with her writing and her ripping. So she
I practiced
she obviously practiced
all week.
at Jefferson Lab. She was probably practicing at her desk.
That's what we do there, is practice.
But here's the question, and you see a chart behind me in green and white there. The point is, and I think we started to get to it with some of the discussions we had in the last hour or so. But if you think about not only tonight, but last Thursday when we had our first option 1 that we discussed, do you feel that anything was accomplished is one question. Okay, so we're going to do it one at a time. And not everyone has to speak or ever, just some thoughts on that. Do you feel, or what did we accomplish here in this conversation over the last 2 evenings that we were here together?
I think we certainly kind of, I don't know if anybody's mind was really changed, but we certainly got a better idea of how other people think on the subject.
Sometimes we get mired in our own perspective. I would further suggest that if they ever try and make this come to fruition, don't take it to Congress. Don't let those guys touch it. Have an independent group with a good mix in it, put the thing together and say, pass it or fail it. But
That's your only choice, though, so
Pardon?
that's your only choice, so vote for a person that will represent you and your thoughts.
yeah, well,
Yes.
I would just say that, and I picked this up before I even came to the first meeting, I was reading through the material. I think the idea of having three options is maybe a little bit arbitrary, and many of the people in this room would probably say we would like to have a blend where you pick out the nuggets, so the good points from 1, 2, and 3.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. Absolutely. Yes.
What Michelle said at the beginning, we all agree on the basic principles, you know, there is a problem. We all have the same common ideas. We just have to be able to put it all together for the common good.
Anyone else on that one?
Excuse me, I was going to just respond to what you said. In many of these discussions, since Steve,
Yes.
Yes, Steve, okay, thank you. Is that the group may come up with a 4th and a 5th option. Or, as you said, picking, cherry picking from the 3 that exist. So that is okay.
All right, and you sort of touched on this, has your thinking about the issue changed, and if so, how? Yes.
A little bit, but one question keeps going through my head. Does Canada have problems with us going up there all the time?
Yeah, we don't talk about coming over the border, right?
No, yeah, but
Or us
are we,
going there.
are we going north to Canada or doing the same thing with them?
Yeah, the 60s.
Or moving to Mexico. There are Americans that are moving to Mexico
Yeah.
And
because of
other
the
parts of
housing
South
and the
America.
cost of living.
I do know a family who, they went down and lived in Mexico for a year.
I had relatives that lived in
Yeah.
Mexico in Guadalajara.
Guadalajara.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can fly directly from Guadalajara back to the U.S. to get health care.
There are people who go down there because of alternative medications. that they
Anyone
can't
else
get.
on,
I would suggest they have a lot of these study groups and get as many people in our country involved in it as possible so they have a better appreciation of what the problem really is. You know, when you get somebody in a political position, you know, they'll tell you what they need to tell you. This way we get to discover the real facts and the real issues and see just how difficult they are to deal with and what's realistic and what is not. So I think they ought to have one of these things at every school,
Right.
you know.
Teach civics.
Yeah. I just,
They're getting away from me.
that's interesting because we're talking about getting into the schools, so we'll bring that up a little bit later.
Does anybody else have any part of this issue that might have been changed in your thinking?
I don't know about change, but Charmaine raised the issue last week that I thought it got a lot of attention. It was about public policy in terms of the work that we could do to help support countries that would prevent some of the immigration needs. And I thought that was pretty good to kind of refocus the attention on how we might help in other ways.
Yeah, change just might mean an expanded perspective or something else that opened, or maybe but there should be no wall, and I think that there should be walls around the entire country. Anything, yes.
No, I mean, that's spot on. You must have read my mind. Root cause, people coming here for a reason. They're fleeing, refugeeing from places or better opportunity. They do it by any way they need to do it, right? So, you know, when we try to do trade on this continent, the South, not just Mexico, keep going, that's a great thing. I think we should go after that with the same amount of zeal that we would go after an enemy, with capitalistic mindset, so we can help and gain, and that would change a lot of things, right? So rather than shift the problem north, you won't have a problem to shift. You actually got better options. We can bring that part of the world into a better place, and I think it would be welcome in most cases, and there's great opportunity. That hasn't been, I don't know where that topic lies as far as options in the discussion and the debate. Don't build a wall, go build some policy.
And just an observation I didn't get to share earlier, I didn't see the word refugee till we got to option 3.
That's true.
Good point.
Kept talking about immigrants, illegal immigrants. Didn't talk about refugees, people fleeing for a reason, until we got to 3.
I also want to validate and acknowledge what's your name, sir?
I'm Bruce.
Bruce? Yeah, what Bruce said. I think a lot of focus is being placed on fear of people coming into this country, when statistics have shown that there's nothing to fear. A lot of the folks that do damage in this country, if we go back and look, are people that are from here. So if we could have a paradigm shift and just acknowledge difference or acknowledge other people's origin and cultures, and just look at the beauty that immigration has or diversity has, I think we could have a much better society. If we started from kindergarten to elementary school to middle school to high school and just appreciate differences, we could have a much better society.
I thought it was so interesting last week when Lindsay's comment was, I have friends of who are from different cultures, and I can't imagine my life without them. And I think you said something like that. And I thought, what a perspective from a young person.
I mean, change that emotion from fear to something that is positive, to love. Because it doesn't have to be fear. It could be love.
This article right here says, while some people have argued that immigration leads to increased criminal activities, a recent analysis of urban crime rates from 1970 to 2010 found that immigration was on an average linked to decrease in violent crimes and property crimes.
I think one of the
I
things.
mean, and you're talking about fear and everything. I'm reading right here from it's not, I don't see fear in that. I see facts and statistics.
I think we need to take a closer look at the guys coming in here. And when you think about somebody who's got a family of 3, he's not able to get work, or he's persecuted by his local government, and he has the courage to say, come on, we're getting out of here. I don't know how we're going to do it. We're going to go to a different country, start all over, learn their language, and try and make it happen. That takes a lot of guts.
And I think that's exactly what America was built on. I mean, if we go back to how folks who came to America came here, if we believe, if we look at the situations that they were fleeing when they came here for their life, to help themselves and their family, to have new opportunities. It hasn't changed. It's the same story. It's just that in some instances, we're 4 or 5 generations removed from that. And so because you're so far removed, you don't remember that your ancestors had another language that they spoke when they came here. They may not have been fully welcomed here. They may not, even if they came on the Mayflower, we know the story, right? We know exactly why.
And they're best and brightest on the Mayflower either.
Well, that's my point. That's my point.
But they became the best.
Exactly.
They became the best.
So, and as Richard said earlier, there are gems in immigration. We see it every day. I mean, if we look at our political atmosphere, if we look at our school system, if we look at every profession in this country, immigrants, we all are. So, let's remove the fear, as my husband said, and let's replace that with love, because love is also an emotion. And the Bible says, perfect love casts out fear. So let's get into perfect love so that fear can be cast.
And this gentleman here talked about, and I think you talked about, how we could support other countries so people wouldn't have a desire necessarily to leave.
Right.
But symbolically, in this country, we have a posture of building walls not only along the border of Mexico, but internationally. So this whole concept of helping other people is contradictory in that we're saying internationally and even along the Mexican border, we want to be isolated. You stay on your side of the fence and we'll stay on our side. And I think that these barriers are historic in our country. There was a reason why people didn't want to have people who didn't look the same or live in the same community to share a school environment. All of it based on fear. And I agree that if we just see people as basically, we know we have people who don't do the right thing in all cultures, all over the world, in our country, outside of our country. They're bad people everywhere. But generally, most people want the best for their families. And I don't think these people are coming over here necessarily, as a whole, to harm anyone, but they want a better life. When I see immigrants in the community, if I'm at Walmart or somewhere and I see a Hispanic family, there's a mom, there's a dad, their children. I don't fear them. I assume that they're here because they want to work and they want to provide, and America is such a great place. I swear if I lived in Mexico under the same conditions they lived, I would probably be here undocumented if that was the only way I felt that I could come to a country that would provide the opportunity. And this is a great country. I'm fortunate that I was born here, I get to stay here, don't have to worry about being deported. But I do understand why somebody would want to come to a place as great as America. So I'm not criticizing America. I think it's the greatest place on earth to live. And anybody who's living here is blessed to be here. Whether you were born here or you're here undocumented, even being here undocumented is a blessing, because you could be somewhere else far worse. And living in the shadows and living in the darkness of America because of fear of being deported, it's not a good thing, but it's worth it. If you have to go back to a country where there's no opportunity, where you are mistreated, I can understand why they come here. And we are going to have to send some people back, because they're going to deserve to go back if they break our laws. We're going to have to send people back if they become members of gangs and they terrorize our community. I don't think that's the majority of the people, though. But people who live here in this country, they need to get the same treatment. If they terrorize our community, they need to be dealt with. We might not be able to deport them, but there should be some consequence, whether you live here and was born here or whether you came here undocumented. Everybody who violates our laws in this country should have a consequence for violating the law, no matter what their status is here.
Too many persons as it is.
So did we have any common sense of direction for this issue? Was there any, we detect any common sense direction or any sense of direction that was common among us?
I think before we try and pick a direction or try and...
No, just what we heard. I mean...
Okay. I think what I'm getting out of these guys and what I'm finding myself is that whatever direction we go in, before we choose that direction or choose this method of repair to our system, we learn to have a better respect for the people that we're trying to do this to. You know, these are real human beings. They're like us. You know, they're not as fortunate as we are, but they have courage, they have wisdom, they have ability, and we have to respect them for that. And when we make these laws, we need to make the laws that apply to decent human beings and not to a bunch of, you know, rodents or something. We need to treat these people as they are.
If you go to Boston and talk to the Irish and talk to the parents and the parents of the parents, the way that the Irish were treated, you know, 3 or 4 generations ago was atrocious, absolutely atrocious. If you go and talk to the Polish people that came over to this country, and you know, in the enclaves, they were treated like second-rate citizens. But it's because they were different.
Okay.
Blue-eyed, blonde hair, different. Okay.
Right.
They were still blue-eyed, blonde hair because you could say they're different.
And let's not forget that some of us came over on slave ships.
Well, you didn't have a choice.
We did not have a choice, but we are resilient people. And we rise up, and I think a lot of these immigrants will rise up also. You spoke about MS-13. That is a bad gang.
Yeah.
We have other
Oh, I know, there's a
American
lot
born
of...
gangs.
They didn't.
too.
They
But I mean,
did.
but
Absolutely.
They did rise up.
Aryan Nation.
They did rise up. They got an education. They spoke the English language. They got jobs, and their children got better jobs, and they want their children's children to have education. They're the MIT graduates. They're the Harvard graduates.
Yes.
You know, you try to go to Cambridge. See what you go to Cambridge.
And I ask you why, because of just what you said. They weren't like you. They were different from whoever we define in this country as the majority culture, who have what they believe to be united values and ways of thinking. Those immigrants that came over were treated that way because they weren't like that group. Okay, so these Mexicans aren't from Norway. You know,
but there's
we were told that we need more people from Norway or wherever, but these people are not from Norway. And part of it is a fear of the browning of this country. That's another fear. That is another fear. So that's why I think that we sort of target this particular group of people, Hispanic people from across the border. And his statistics were right. He's correct. 50-some%, if not more, I believe, are coming from those groups. Mexico, Guatemala, and some other places that they listed. But I think it's what he said when I asked, well, why were the Polish people treated that way? And why were these other groups of people treated that way? And he says because they weren't blue-eyed, I guess.
No, they were
They were
blue-eyed
blue-eyed.
blonde. They are blue-eyed blonde
But you said they were treated that way.
because they spoke a different language.
They
They had
spoke
a
a different
different. But their second generation, they were
To
not.
answer your question and maybe close out, I don't know.
Yes.
But I think what amongst us in this group, we all agree that our system is broken. It needs to be fixed. We threw out everything we had, what we knew, and how we think it can be fixed. But none of us here are lawmakers, and we need to get this to our lawmakers, our politicians, our Congress. You know, maybe if, I don't know, maybe if one or two could have sat in here with us these 2 nights to hear what somebody outside of that reaching across the aisle here, maybe they could hear something and see something different. Because they look at themselves like they're the only ones in this world. And there's outside people who do have emotions, feelings, and words that they want to present, but that's never heard. So maybe the NIFI can get this to them. Maybe we can do another meeting like this at some time, and maybe we can invite someone from Congress, 2 or 3 people, and let them hear what we, the outside, what we see, hear, and feel.
I'm going to ask permission to go 10 minutes more. Is that a problem for anybody? You know, you guys are long-winded. And we want to hear what you say.
Blaming you all.
And I know that I am bad about cutting in and interrupting you. So that is my fault since I'm moderating. Quickly.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you, all of you collectively, that have done so much work putting this together. And we've only got a few minutes. Before we finish, could you share with us what happens to all this
Yes.
material?
Yes.
Where does it go?
Yes.
How is it collated? What's
Yes.
your hopes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I promise to do that.
Valerie.
I want to.
Valerie, and Valerie, forgive me for calling you Tina all night.
Okay, Turner. That's a good one. I want to go back to whether or not it's broken, because I heard something a little different than it being like totally broken. I heard us talk about systems in place that we don't fully utilize too. The HB, what is it? The visa system.
HB what?
H1B and HB2.
Yeah, that
Two,
many
right,
folks had
called.
experience with it and how it could be used for unskilled, like it's used for skilled laborers. You know, there was talk about a broader usage of the green cards, and I think there are systems that aren't fully utilized. And whether that means it's totally broken or not, I don't know. But so I just want to kind of put that out there because I heard a lot of conversation about using some existing systems.
So I heard, just as an observation, a common thing, and it was one of the statistics here that sounds, U.S. immigrants are seen as a strength more than a burden to the country. And I think for what everybody said, we all agree that people who are coming to this country add value and make this country better. You know, and there may be 1 or 2 bad apples in every million that come in, but the vast majority, we all agree that everybody who's coming here, again, regardless of whether they're fleeing from a refugee situation or just coming here looking for a better life, they're all coming here to contribute and make America a better place.
Just quickly, what was maybe one of the major tensions that we found in terms of, as we discussed this issue? Was there any?
The perception of fear.
Yes.
I would like to speak to that just for a moment, if I could. I know Bruce I felt Bruce was taking exception to something that I was saying and classifying my outlook on it as fear. I don't think anybody here could say that I ever promoted the idea of cutting off all immigration and that I thought immigrants were bad. I don't think I ever said anything remotely. I was proposing, it's not fear, it's caution if you want a system in place to vet. Would you willingly allow somebody you knew to be a convicted murderer or a sex offender live next door to you? Why would you let them into your country? I would never advocate for stopping immigration. There's a difference between fear and common sense precautions.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What's the, I mean, because I think we're all talking about, we're talking about several different things. One is folks who are coming here legally, overstaying their visas. We're talking about people who come here legally through the H-1B or various visa systems to come here. We're talking about people who come here illegally, who may be coming in through the border. But my understanding is that there's a process for coming in, even if you came in through a border. There's a process. It may not be the same as the process that you would go through if you came in through the airport, but there should be, I mean, I know in Florida, when people are coming over from Haiti or from Cuba, there's a system in place there to have them go through a process to then be either designated as a refugee or whatever. There's a process that they go through before they're then allowed to come and, you know, be in Miami or wherever else they move to. But there's a process in place. So is this conversation more about the immigrants that are coming across the border through, without going through the process, or is this about immigrants that are coming and all the other ways? So is it just about folks who are coming from Mexico, or is it about everyone?
No, it's about immigration, period.
We,
you know, somebody pointed out we didn't mention refugees as a third option, but it's about refugees as well. It's about the statistics that Lisa shared and that all of you shared, you know, in terms of immigration. They come from other countries and come by other ways than what we're hearing most about on the news. So it's about immigration.
Right, because our whole most of the people in technology today are here through an H-1B visa process, and they're the majority of our immigrants right here, right now, I think. And so, you know, I don't hear us talking about those people as being part of the immigrant population.
Right. I think it's just a matter of what came up in this group. It was not by intent.
It shows a bigger failed process that they are vetting people coming here, but that they let them overstay and that they're not, you know, tracking that or being able to say, okay, your time's up, time for you to go. They just, it's like nobody cares.
I think if you talk to an IT people about the H-1B project, more people would have an opinion of being displaced by lower paid people from foreign countries taking their high-tech jobs.
So then do we need to train people in America to be skilled in those areas?
We need to train the businessman to not.
Well, you know, it's funny, but when they come up here, they'll work for anything. And we're concerned that they'll replace us at our job. And they'll do any kind of work.
I'm not.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Now, where it really hurts us is when we take a factory and move it to Mexico. Because we had high-paying jobs up here that went away. That's a lot more painful than immigrants, believe me.
But I think
that's a whole different subject.
I think
we can talk a very long time on that subject.
The gentleman was saying that I might have taken exception, but I really didn't. I was just talking generally about fear as a nation about immigration, so I didn't really take it personally. But even when he says, you know, fear about taking our jobs, I don't have that fear. I never have. Maybe some people do, but I don't. I don't do roofing, and I'm not afraid to take my job.
As much as I hate to cut it off, and you guys can continue that, but I want you to fill out this survey. This is the critical part of the research. And if you didn't get one, I have some more here. And hopefully, you can hear what I'm going to explain, the question that was asked earlier about what will happen. Excuse me, all of the NIF forums end with a survey. So that is no different. In fact, everything that we have done is the same. The only difference is that 10 sites were selected to deliberately get a broad spectrum of different perspectives in a room so that we could have this discussion. Normally, that's how they try to do it anyway. But over the course of last year, when this forum was being held across the country, I believe I mentioned that last week, is that more frequently they were held in an academic setting. And so, you know, everyday folk in the work world did not necessarily get to have their voices heard. So this is one way of being sure that a lot of different voices are heard. So there are 10 sites across the country that look like this, look different, but have as broad a perspective as the conveners could find. I want to just thank you for participating in this research. And I know that our host for this opportunity, United Citizens Power, Michelle, is planning to have more of these kinds of discussions with other groups. For those of you, someone suggested we should have lots of these small groups everywhere that we can, in schools, etc., libraries, churches. You can do that. You don't have to be any special somebody to do that. You can do that. Back on that table, if any of you are interested in moderating, like Lisa and I have been doing, and Michelle, we would love to have you do that. And we will be offering as part of this, a special training in moderating. And if you are interested, be sure that you get your name, and please print it, and your email address and your phone number on the document that says moderators, moderator training, so that I can get in touch with you when that's occurring. And it'll be either later this year or the first of next year. Given that we're about to be in the holiday season, it'll probably be the first of next year. I think, I guess if I had any comment, it is with a group as eager and as full of rich ideas and thoughts that you had, I would say, you know, we could use absolutely 3 nights to do this, so that each one of the options could get as much of an airing as possible. So thank you so much. And I want to thank all the volunteers again for being part of this, and for the wonderful meal that we had. If there is any other questions, Michelle has a little something that she wants to add so that you can participate in lots of things.
So, you guys, thank you so much for coming. I know you're itching to get out. I appreciate it. Like Pat had said, we're hoping to have some more forums like this. The next national topic is on the opioid crisis. All right, so we'll be having another forum probably in the spring or sometime in the spring. So I've got some other activities. Election Day is coming up, right? Everybody's going to vote, and everybody's going to take their buddy to vote too. One of the things that United Citizen Power is doing to help get out the vote is we're actually having polling parties on the day of election. Used to be, communities would have fairs and things and celebrate going around voting, and so in an effort to make voting more fun, there's a national organization that we've hooked up with that we're having actual parties at the polling locations, 2 in Suffolk and 2 in Franklin. And if you're interested in participating and finding out what that's all about, we've got sign-up sheets out there. Just put your name down, and we'll be sure to give you a call. Our next United Citizen Power meeting is next Tuesday, October 30th. We have that at 6:30, and it's at the, I'm pointing the wrong way, I'm sure, but it's off of 17 at the Firehouse number 5 in Suffolk, down that way towards Harbor View. Okay, and that's where we meet. So at 6:30, we'll be meeting there. We'll be talking a little bit more about our Get Out the Vote efforts, and also what we're going to be doing after the election, which is we're going to find out what issues we're going to start working on. So there's some sign-up sheets out there. There's also other deliberation books, the other ideas that you might like for as topics. If you can fill that out, if you can give us a hint on your what you're interested in, what kind of that you wouldn't mind having a forum with, we can invite you back. So take a look, sign up for everything. We want you involved, and thank you so much for coming.
And I school, so.
I'm sorry, one more thing. Along what you had said with Pat about having a forum, right? She was talking about moderating or hosting, right? You could have a small thing in your living room and pick up your neighbors, right? It doesn't have to be a big ordeal like this. Have 5 or 6 people sitting in your neighborhood, right? You'll have the book. We can even provide moderators for you, right? But consider being a host. Consider having one of these, right? And getting people. It's just another option, kind of a lightweight option to maybe get involved and get some of your other friends involved as well.
Thank you all so much. Thank you. And we have to collect your survey before you walk out the door.
Can't leave.
Yeah, can't leave. Valerie's going to tackle you.
Somebody blocking the door. Thanks for coming. Yeah, it was good. It was great having you.
I think it was a great experience to hear a bunch of diverse views, and at the end of the day, I think we all kind of found a common ground or realized that we all shared one coming into this.
Don't have anything, just happy to be here. Just different perspectives from everybody, just getting what other people experience.
I think it was an outstanding opportunity to share in this civic experience where we're all looking at the issue of immigration from various perspectives. I picked up on key points from different views from different people, obviously, and I think my views were heard as well. I think we did a good job of putting the issues out there and coming to a common table. I'm more of a problem solver. I don't like just to bring the issues. I actually want to solve the problems, and that was a little frustrating in that wasn't really what this was about. It was more or less bringing it up and looking at views of it. So I'd be very interested going forward in, okay, now we've talked about it, what are we going to do about it? Thank you.
Well, I think the process was wonderful. I've never had an opportunity to sit in a group and share ideas on something that's so current, particularly in today's political climate. And I've taken away some ideas that I'm going to hash over in my own mind. Hasn't changed the way I feel about immigration, because I'm pro-immigration, but I better understand the viewpoints of the people that were in the group.
Process was great. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed listening to everyone and their point of views, their opinions, and we did it civically. Everyone respected each other, and it was great and fantastic. But I also think that next time we do something like this, that we should have one of our political leaders here with us, maybe 1 or 2, and that they too can understand what we on the outside look and see and how we feel about things, and not just those who look at each other across the aisle.
I'm very pleased with Ms. Patricia Harbour for inviting us here at this forum. I think it was very productive. We covered some very important points, and I think that we should continue on different subjects moving forward. I'm hoping that whatever we said tonight and last week is going to go to a higher level where we can make some changes in our community, because we covered some very important points. Immigration is a very hot topic, and right now there is fear that is being spread, and I think that is very wrong. immigration brings a lot of positives to our community locally and around in the United States. So it was very productive.
I agree.
I thought it was a very good exercise for the citizens to get together and speak together. I mentioned this to one of the other ladies here. I think this is a futile effort until we can get our politicians to work together more effectively.
This is my second time here, and I love the oh God, I love everything that was done here, the talking and everything, and it's very knowledgeable. I've learned a lot today and last week. So
I'd like to thank United Citizen Power for convening this most important conversation. I think the more that communities come together and talk about issues, the more we can find common ground and move towards solution. I think we had very rich discussions about a number of things as we talked through the three options. I think there are lots of things that many of us wanted to say and that time just didn't allow because it was important to listen to others' opinions. One thing in particular that I didn't get to speak about that I think it would be nice to talk about it in future forums is this whole issue of resettlement and how do we help refugees resettle and young people and families who are coming here, sometimes fleeing difficult situations in their communities. I think that would be an important part of the conversation that we really didn't get to. And I think there's some good models of that around the country. In addition to that, I shared that many of us came, or our ancestors came as immigrants in different ways. Some of us came not by choice, but by force. But we're resilient people, and we have survived in this country, and I think a lot of other immigrants who come in here have the same opportunities and will do the same. So thank you for allowing me to participate.